Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Faculty Spotlight. I am Zackery Carlock. I am back. I hope you enjoyed last week's show with Cynthia talking with our guest last week. Quick reminder before we get started with our guest here today, we will not have a show next week as everyone's on Thanksgiving. So from everyone here at Ram Radio, we want to say we hope you have a happy Thanksgiving and enjoy your holiday with your family and get some much-needed rest. So, without further ado, I want to allow our special guest to introduce herself here. Introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Rebecca Aidala, just in case you didn't know how to pronounce the last name.
I actually was on it. I had.
All right,
I got
Aidala.
that. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Where do you teach at?
Currently I am the head of school at Ambleside Contra Valley. I teach high school humanities part time, and then I adjunct for ASU as an English instructor.
Awesome. I could not adjunct as an English instructor. You and I were talking off air. I've had the opportunity to teach English, and I always told everyone I ever worked for, I don't even speak English very good or so.
Oh no.
That usually told him he ain't doing it well.
Exactly.
So that being said, how long have you been in San Angelo? There's the word I was looking for.
Okay, so I have lived in San Angelo since the early 90s.
Okay.
Currently, I actually live in Ballinger now for several years.
Sure.
So I commute to San Angelo daily to work at Ambleside, and then I teach for ASU online. Okay. And then I also adjunct for ASU on the Ambleside campus.
Okay.
Where I'm able to teach 4 English courses to my students there.
Very cool.
Yes.
Where are you from originally? I read somewhere you're from New York.
Okay, so I was born in upstate New York, and
Okay, where at?
Elmira.
I've heard of that. I used to live in Plattsburgh.
Okay.
I lived in Plattsburgh for a year, and I lived in Guilderland outside of Albany for a year.
Okay. About the only thing I know is that's where the state prison is located, is in Elmira, and my family moved from Elmira after a flood in 1972.
Oh,
So
you
I've
left
been in
there
Texas.
a long time ago. Yeah.
Well, Tennyson is where I grew up, so the middle of nowhere, Texas.
There's
so
a few
we
of those.
moved there when I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I've lived in different areas
So
in
not
Texas.
not a true New Yorker, just a New York born.
Right, just
Yeah.
enough to, been in Texas long enough to say y'all and fixing to and all the other.
I don't see many
idiosyncrasies.
English teachers that say y'all. No,
It's
some days.
necessary sometimes. We have to blend.
Yeah, I about to say you got to blend in, right? When in Rome, right?
Yes.
So, what do you think for you is the best part of being in the San Angelo area out here? You've been here probably longer than any guest we've had this year.
I love that there's a transition toward the arts now that we've become the visual arts capital. There's more to do than people realize.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
besides,
there is.
Besides Mexican food restaurants and the rodeo, there's much more to do than people realize.
Although the rodeo is a pretty cool thing. It's second largest rodeo in Texas, from what I understand.
It is. It's not my wheelhouse, but
Sure.
I'm glad that people enjoy it. So
Yeah, I'm not a I like to go to the rodeo once in a while. I like to take my son and go see different things, but it's not something that I'm like, I have to go like some people. And no offense to any of those people, it's a great thing. They enjoy it. Some people, it's a livelihood.
It's definitely it is a cultural phenomenon in our area. So.
Sure. Yeah, no, I completely get that. I like how you talk about the arts. One of our guests we've had on here a couple times now was Maestro Hector Guzman with the Symphony Orchestra. And I got to go to the orchestra this last time, and they do a phenomenal job out there.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
One of our students here at Ram Radio in the spring, I believe, she's a part of the art department over here, and actually won one of the scholarships with her artwork at last year's art show. So I love that, like you mentioned, the arts is a big thing around here, and okay, so I have to ask, this Rams, what do you think of the Rams around town? Because you mentioned the arts, and I see so many different artwork on these Rams.
Right. I love it. I love that it celebrates that, we were the mohair capital of I guess, the United States, and I think that sets us apart. There's some things that set us apart in a lovely way.
Yeah.
They've become more of an advertisement than
Sometimes, yeah.
but some of them are really, really beautiful.
Yeah, there's one we went to that was outside of an ice cream shop or something downtown, and I was like, wow, this is really neat. And
Yeah, that's one of our goals, to at some point have one in front of Ambleside downtown.
Oh, that would be really cool.
Yes.
Yeah, my daughter, I have a 14-year-old who, her thing that she does with us is we have the list of all the Rams, and we go try to
Yes.
find 5 or 6 of them on the weekend and stuff like that.
I wish they would also do that with some of the public art,
Oh,
like
yeah.
the murals too.
Yeah.
I wish they would
Yeah, that would
create
be
a
really-
scavenger hunt or something using those.
I love that, a scavenger.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah. So I'm just going through stuff, but what is your? You mentioned the cultural and the arts as being one of your favorite things. If you could change one thing about San Angelo, what would you change?
The driving ability has declined as of late.
Yeah.
I think that just as the city has grown, people have become more aggressive in their driving.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
everyone needs
anywhere
to
you
calm
go.
down. Why are we in a hurry? It's San
Yeah.
Angelo. So
And that's not just an Angelo. I will tell you, it's not just a San Angelo problem. I see it everywhere I go nowadays. And my producer's in there going, yep.
yeah, I think in that respect, we've gone from being a very laid-back community to people have this sense of urgency
Yeah.
now that I think probably wasn't like that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I think, too, the farm equipment's not coming through town as much, and I think
Yeah.
that's caused people there's really no way to hurry if
Right.
you have a tractor driving down Knickerbocker.
Oh,
but,
no, absolutely.
But I don't know that that's happening anymore.
I did get stuck behind one the other day on Knickerbocker, as a
Okay.
matter of fact. I
Yeah.
did.
And it's just a reminder that we're in, we're still a big town,
Yeah.
not a small city, and
Right.
everyone needs to calm down.
Yeah, we are a farming. We have farming
Yes.
communities out here. No, and I will tell you, I might be a part of that problem, but it's not because I'm trying to be aggressive. It's usually because I'm just running late.
Right.
I'm just late where I'm going.
I understand.
No, and that's great. And one of the things I've noticed about San Angelo is that people just seem to be a lot nicer than anywhere else I've been. It's just a different
Absolutely.
community. So let's talk about your journey to Angelo State. How'd you end up working with Angelo State and all
Okay.
that? And
So my undergraduate is from Angelo State University, and so
Okay.
it's interesting that I'm teaching English for Angelo State because my goal in my undergraduate was to work as a probation officer. So I majored
Wow.
in sociology, minored in criminal justice and Spanish,
Yeah.
and began the MPA program here and started working at Ambleside while I was pursuing that. Didn't finish that, so I was like a graduate dropout
Right.
at one point. Found my passion for Shakespeare while teaching at Ambleside and pursued my graduate degree in Shakespeare and theater.
wow.
And that's how I came back as an adjunct, and mainly because I stalked the department applying frequently. So, but it started, organically that I was teaching courses, the dual credit courses
Sure.
at the Ambleside campus, and then slowly evolved into.
That's actually very impressive. And you're right. It is a huge stark difference than wanting to be a probation officer.
Exactly.
It's like the other side of the spectrum there.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, as I head to school, I guess there's some of those.
There's a
some
few
of that
similarities.
preparation
Yeah, sure.
helped me in the role that I currently serve. So
Absolutely,
yes.
absolutely. Especially if you're having to deal with at-risk students and
Yes,
different
exactly.
things like that. And some of those students are just difficult to
Yes.
deal with.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned you're out at Ambleside.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a lot about what Ambleside is. I'm going to just be honest.
It's a private school. It is a
Okay.
Christian school. We're very different. We're an alternative type of education in
Okay.
that we use classical curriculum. We don't do drill and kill testing. There's much more writing, much more discussion. It's a rigorous, which the English department, history department would probably love these things. That it's a little bit more rigor, a little bit more geared toward writing based as opposed to objective testing.
I don't hate that. I got to
Right.
tell you, as a teacher that came out of public school, I don't hate that idea. You know, one of the things that always stuck out to me was that we have a system in Texas public schools that there was a point where the STAR test in English was so difficult that some of the teachers couldn't have passed it.
Right.
And so how can we expect students, right?
Exactly.
And I've never, now, this is not a very popular thought, but I've never been a fan of formal testing, like standardized testing.
Right.
Never been a fan of it. I only went along with it because it was my job.
Sure.
You know, just because I think that those standardized tests can tend to
I think it has some value. I mean, you know, you want to measure if kids are hitting benchmarks, if teachers are doing their jobs. But, you know, and the pendulum sometimes goes too far one way or the other.
Yeah. So that's a good way to say it.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we just have to remember that children are people. They're not products. Yeah. And sometimes that gets lost in a system.
Sure.
Versus using a method or a philosophy in training the mind.
Yeah. I just always felt there was maybe a different way to do the measurement sometimes.
Sure.
And I do like that some schools do utilize the new MAP testing that's been going since COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like that was a great, because it's a beginning, it's a BOY, MOY,
right.
EOY
right.
style test, and I can measure growth
right.
that way. And I always enjoyed those.
Sure.
And it's a very malleable test in that you could take 40 questions and you could end up being done at 15,
right?
Depending on how you perform,
right?
And so I always enjoyed that. I just felt like there were different ways,
sure.
And I just see students that struggle, and I'm sure you've seen this too. Students that struggle, that sometimes they get to a point where they feel like there's no way out of the struggle.
Exactly, and we see that. I mean, even at Ambleside, some of the students that we gain are getting lost in the system or
sure.
oppressed by it, or they're neurodivergent and they have trouble fitting into this cookie cutter role. And so at Ambleside, they're able to find their space,
sure.
and be who they are without, like I said, the drill and kill testing, which,
sure.
like I said, has merit.
Sure.
But we don't rely heavily on that
right.
Where we are. And it's just good for San Angelo to have lots of alternatives.
Sure.
You know?
No, absolutely.
I'm not opposed to public or, sports programs. I think
right.
all of those things have value, but
no, absolutely.
It's nice to have an alternative for kids who maybe are struggling elsewhere.
Well, and my daughter plays tennis,
mm-hmm.
right? So I obviously I don't have, and I played baseball in
right.
high school, and I don't have a problem with, say, the sports side of things. I always felt like sports was a good way to build teamwork skills,
exactly.
learn to work as a part of a group, all
right.
the different things you learn. So I never had a problem with that. And I don't have a problem with public school either. Like
right.
I said, it fed my family for
sure.
many years. I just know that, and I just know that sometimes having the, and you said it best, opportunity,
right,
a chance. Look, there's some kids that are never going to play a sport in their life.
Exactly.
They don't need to go to a school. They can go to a school that doesn't offer a sport.
Right.
They don't need to worry about it, and they don't need to feel ostracized because they don't do
right.
a sport or something like that.
I grew up, I went to a small town public school. I went to Bront. I wasn't an athlete. I played in the band, which was kind of the alternative.
I was in the band too.
To just, well, and if you went to small town Texas, some of the kids are in everything. They're in every
yeah.
sport
oh,
and
sure.
every club, and all the extracurriculars. But some of the best teachers I had were coaches.
Yeah.
Some best history teachers I've had, and I've heard. So I'm not opposed to it. I'm the result of that. My undergraduate is
sure.
from public school.
Yeah.
So
no, that's great.
Yeah.
So looking at your education career,
mm-hmm.
what has been one of the best things you've loved about being able to educate and mold young minds, if you will?
We were talking about before we came on, just to have a child come to you that's struggling or is insecure or lacks confidence, and finding out that they can do hard things, showing them that they can, and expecting greatness of them until they achieve it. And this idea that it's okay to not be able to do something yet, but
yeah.
we're always growing. We're always becoming a better version of ourselves, and to be able to share that journey with a student who, being against high school, lacking confidence, or gaining a student in like the 10th grade that comes with all this baggage
yeah.
from just like I said, being oppressed by a system and helping them realize that they can do hard things. But even some of the dual credit students at the beginning of the year, from the various schools that I teach for, everything from Bernie to kids from Cornerstone. It's just
That's where my
kids from
daughter's
all
at.
over Texas.
My daughter's at Cornerstone.
Okay, very good. And so to have these kids at the beginning of the year saying, I used to love writing, and then immediately they made it all about a system, and you've got to do the outline, and instead of giving some freedom for the writing process and letting people figure out what their writing process is. Yes, we need to know how to outline. We need to know how to do those things.
Sure.
But so much of writing we spend on the process that you never get to the creative element. And oftentimes you have work that's technologically correct, but it's not inspired. And having kids be able to voice that in the online forum where I used to love writing, and then something happened in junior high and I hated writing. And then because of the way the course is designed through ASU Online, they fall in love with writing again, just because they're able to get at some of that creative process without it being this formulary, teaching them writing technique as opposed to getting at their writing style.
Yeah. Now, I'm gonna tell you, I'm trying not to cry here because you kind of hit a couple things that I'm just like, wow. Like, and I'll tell you one of them, and I don't in any way, I'm not bashing public school, but my daughter was one of those students that loved writing, was a creative writing champion in elementary, wanted to write this whole series of short novels, teenage short novels, and actually wrote the first couple of them and then lost them. But when she got to junior high, it became about a process, and she lost that passion.
Right.
And it hurt. It killed me as a parent to see her lose it because she loved writing so much, and she's so creative.
Right.
And she's starting to get back now.
Well, she may end up a dual credit student online.
And I really am hoping so.
Like I said, the way it's set up, it really brings them back to the heart of it, even though they're having to write at the college level and they're having to do some things they've not, done before in their high school journey. They're still. And
and I know some of our listeners won't understand what I'm about to say, but you will. Her Lexile has always been in the 1350s to 1400. I mean, just as a sixth grader, she was up at the 1300s. I mean, that just tells you the level.
Well, one of the things I use as kind of a comparison is like with the outlining process, which I said there's value in that.
No,
when
absolutely.
I wrote my dissertation, I had to have an outline. You're just not going to wing it. You have to have a plan.
I make my public speaking students write an outline.
Right, you have to. But I think so much in the system is focused on that. And it's kind of like when they start to introduce telling time to a first grader or a second grader. These kids are stressed out, and you spend a whole semester and you're just badgering them. Or you could make it like a 2-week lesson in fourth grade and they've got it.
Right.
And because neurologically they're in a different space.
Yeah.
Outlining isn't rocket science.
No.
But there's so much in the educational system that puts that emphasis on that process, and it actually just kind of stifles the ideas from the writing, the inspiration from the writing, because they're always trying to write correctly or writing to fit into some sort of, system that it takes out some of that rawness, that pureness of their own voice from their writing.
Well, I'm not trying to write in passive, or I'm trying to write here and there and the different voices and stuff. And no, I understand completely what you're saying. What always amazes me is when I see students who go through all of this process stuff, but because of the way the process was taught or stressed to them, they dump a lot of it before they get here, because they're like, I don't want to remember that, and then they get here and they don't remember how to do Roman numerals to capital letters to numbers to to small letters to small. They don't know. They don't know that, and I'm like, I know you were taught this at some point. And I had one student tell me this year and just say, Mr. Carlock, I was taught that. And I remember it now, but I hated the way my teacher taught it to me, and I just dumped it.
Blocked it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow.
Isn't that sad though?
Yeah, but then I go make it fun. I'm like, look, hey, and don't forget, you got to have at least 2, and if you don't have 2, just throw it in there,
Right.
without anything, and I have fun with it, and because I have good rapport with my students, they go, oh, I remember something like that.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that's the key. You're getting at this idea of a relationship is there, as opposed to I've got to teach you this pile of stuff,
Yeah.
but we're going to take this journey together. And
Yep.
it's like I said, it's a maybe too. Ambleside in some ways is more like college because you do have that there's this shared journey as opposed to the drill and kill. Although there are some, there's still objective testing in college. There has to be.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. There has to be, and I look at. I don't want to say that education in our country is broken, but in some ways, it has been, and in some ways, it's really, really great.
Right.
For me, it was always about math, right? Mm-hmm. I loved math. I was a math kid. I started college as a math major, and I ended up in communication. You figured that.
Did you
one
ever
out.
have Dr. Evans?
No, I was at Tech.
Oh, okay. I had him, and he's incredible.
I actually got thrown out of a calculus class.
Oh no!
And told I wouldn't graduate with a calculus degree, and so that the day that happened, I had to go meet with Dr. Skovanec, who was the dean of arts and sciences, and now is the president of Tech.
Okay.
And he goes, "Yeah, he's not going to let you graduate." And I went, "I'm going to change majors to communication studies." And
right.
I did. And I never looked back. But, God puts us on a path, right?
Sure.
And, but for me, it was always like, I would make a B on every test, even though I got 100% of the answers correct.
Right.
Because I didn't show work.
Right.
Right? It was more about and I hated it. Like, I hated my math teachers for that. Like, did I get the right answer? Well, yeah, you got the right answer. I said, how'd you get it? I went,
I don't know.
Here.
Yeah.
Because I was one of those students that could look at a math problem and go, oh, 4i.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you get there? I don't know. The answer's 4i, right? And, yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so many students sometimes are like that, and there's no malleability in the,
Sure.
oh, if you don't show work, it ain't right. Well, it was right.
Well, and I think especially now, oh my gosh, with photomath and so many of the different apps out there, if a kid doesn't show work, it's automatically suspicious. Because you're like, well, how did you get it? Whereas probably 15, 20 years ago, if somebody did that, we're like, okay, maybe you need to be in a more advanced class.
Yeah.
But now we, even to some degree with the English department or students at school, AI has come into play and the screening for that. And, again, having that relationship with students and even in the smallest things in the online classes, I'm like, you've got to use whole sentences every time.
Yeah.
So I know your voice so that I know when it's not your voice. And so I can, at what point did they stop writing and AI took over?
Right.
So,
yeah. And that's a big controversy is
right.
AI.
Yes.
In especially in, say, an English classroom.
Yes.
Even in my public speaking classroom, I have students that come up and give a speech, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not so sure you wrote that. I'm not sure you didn't just ask AI a question
and they just
regurgitated the answer for me. Yeah.
Exactly.
And sometimes I wonder, and of course, on my end of it, it's a lot harder to prove
right.
than it would be, say, on your end.
Right.
But it is a huge controversy, and I had this conversation with my wife the other day because my wife's finishing up her doctorate in neonatal nursing, and one of the things they had to talk about was how AI is being used in like hospitals and stuff like that. And we got on the topic of AI in schools and all that, and she pointed out to me that whether we like it or not, AI is becoming a way of life.
Right.
Right. And at what point do we embrace it?
Yeah, I think, for me, teaching students, especially if they're ESL, they struggle, or there's some attention struggles with their spelling or grammatical errors. I'm fine with them screening through, like Grammarly, after they've written their work. I think that there's, to use things as a tool, but not in place of our own. Like I said, you don't know when you're going to have the next Harper Lee or Shakespeare in front of you, and how will you know that if they're reliant solely on AI? Yeah. But I think, to keep it in its place.
Yeah, and we're starting to run out of time. We got about 5 minutes here.
Okay.
But I think it's amazing that you did your studies in Shakespearean studies. I've always loved Shakespeare.
Sure.
One of my favorite sonnets, obviously, or not a sonnet, but one of my favorite, I guess it's a soliloquy, is, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo?
Right.
Deny thy father, rebuke thy name, for what is in a name? Does thy rose by any other names not still smell just as sweet? And I utilize that in a lot of my teaching methods when I start talking about, hey, we can call this thing a flim flam. It doesn't change what it does. It still records takes my voice and amplifies it. So I love that you did. That is, to me, phenomenal.
Thank you.
It is, because that's tough. Shakespeare's tough.
It is. What was unusually tough is coming from an American system and then deciding, you know what, I'm really inspired by Shakespeare. I'm gonna go for this. I'm gonna pursue a degree from the Shakespeare Institute, which is in England, and so. I was very excited. I was like, my first reading list, I was like, this is incredible. And I with several books and so many journal articles that I needed to read. And I thought it was the reading list for the semester. It was the reading list for the first week.
Oh!
And so it was very intense.
Wow.
There's so much reading and analyzing of Shakespeare that I did for 3 years.
Phenomenal.
That is just, but it didn't change my passion. It just cost me a lot of sleep. So.
What's sleep nowadays?
Yes, exactly.
So what is, and we're going to do this part quickly, and obviously we don't want specifics or names or anything, but what was one of the toughest things you ever had in education, toughest moments?
Well, a few things. Students who've plagiarized is always hard, especially as an online teacher. But, that's easily redirected. I think the hardest thing for me as a teacher is seeing a student struggle with something that I was unable to help them with. And maybe that meant the end of their journey at Ambleside, which has only happened on very rare occasion that a student is not a fit for the school, that they're struggling with something violent or something like that we cannot help them with. I think that's probably the hardest part, is seeing that
struggle where you can't help.
Yeah, a struggle or a suffering that you can't help. Because I think anything academically that, we may have to be creative or take a step back or do our research or prepare or provide extra help, that academically there's always a way that we can help or guide. But I think when it comes to heart formation, character issues, that difference in morals, that when we become limited, that's, I think, the hardest part. Because, like, if you say, like Ambleside, it's almost like saying there's no hope. But but I don't want to believe that. I just maybe they have to go through a few more storms first. So
I can tell you, I can see your heart for the kids, and I love it. I love your heart for any student, and I feel like I have the same heart for my students. Okay, hard question.
Okay.
I warned you.
Okay.
The hardest question.
Okay.
We ask all day. What's on your playlist? What's on your iPod? What are you listening to?
What do I listen to? Oh my gosh, lately it's Christmas music because I'm one of those people. I'm so sorry. Halloween, we put up our Christmas tree and we start listening to music.
You're killing me.
I'm so sorry. Believe it or not, I listen to a pretty broad playlist. Everything from nostalgic music like Nat King Cole to...
I don't hate that.
Black Sabbath to some,
I don't hate that either.
It just depends on where I am, if I'm exercising or, depends on what I'm doing. In the school, I tend to listen to classical music just because it's what we do. It's very calming in the atmosphere.
Any particular composer you like more than all?
It's probably wrong to say I like Wagner, but I do love his music. Well, I mean, he has some associations with, or he was... Oh, I'm not even going to say that name.
But I know what you mean. But
yes, and people, I'm being cryptic, and so if you get what that means, great.
You can research it and find out on your own. But his music was good, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
I personally, I'm a Mozart guy, but I've read all the studies about Mozart enhancing brain
Sure.
wave patterns and all
Yeah.
that. And it always worked for me.
Well, and our students, they from the little grades up, they study 2 composers a year. And so when they get to high school, we study 6 composers, although this year we're doing contemporary music. So everything from contemporary sacred to all the way through rap.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's impressive. Well, Rebecca, I want to thank you for being here
Yeah,
today.
thank you
You
for
have an
allowing me.
amazing heart
Yes.
for your students, and I love it.
Thank you.
Really hit me right there. It really
Good.
did.
Thank you.
And I thank you for being the teacher that you are.
And thank you for what you do.
Well, I appreciate it. We just like to have a lot of fun, have conversations
Sure.
with people, and tell people stories. And I'm a storyteller. That's all I can tell you. Is I'm a storyteller.
Well, you're in the right place to do that.
Well, I appreciate that. And anyway, as I was saying, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for coming and sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
And with that being said, folks, again, we won't be here next week. Sorry, I know you're going to miss my smiling face. But we'll be back the next week for our last show of the year. We actually have not got that one scheduled. That's what's crazy. But we'll find out who it is when we come back. Until then, folks, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Same time, same Ram channel. Thank you, folks. Have a good night.